Okay, so let's begin. As you can see, this is the Buddha image. And we'll start by paying respects to the Buddha image and offering some devotional chanting. Perfect enlightenment to the teaching which is founded so well, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. To these the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we render with offerings our rightful homage. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having obtained liberation, still had compassion for later generations. May these simple offerings be accepted for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Now let us pay preliminary homage to the Buddha. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened One. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened One. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened One.
So let us all now pay respects to the teacher. 3 bows, please. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. Welcome to the Dhamma stream, Paul. It's great to see you.
Thank you for saying so.
To see you smiling and healthy, I think it's very comforting to many of us.
Well, I'm blessed with good fortune to have a pretty good health, pretty good constitution, and living a rather fortunate life, actually. And I must admit, sometimes I just feel a sense of dismay at the conditions that people have to experience in this world of, global violence, but just also sometimes the physical illness and the limitations and disabilities and the difficult families and the weight of work. It's extremely dismaying to see the burdens that people have to carry. So that's why, when I can, I'd like to somehow contribute, perhaps to lifting some of that, or giving people some ideas of how they can lift the weight of this incarnation, which can get very intense at times. So I'm going to respond to some questions this evening. Today, it's my evening. It's probably your morning or somewhere. Let's not get into that. Respond to your questions, but first of all, of course, let's just take some time to directly practice. And today, just thought we might begin to how we experience consciousness is about, sense consciousness anyway. So as you're sitting, get yourself settled and put aside preoccupations. And then with your eyes open, notice you can see this appearance in front of you, which looks like me, and a Buddha image behind it, and various colors that, and you get, so those colors, what you actually see is various colors, I imagine, and your eye sees that. And then with those colors, you get something recognized as a human body, human face, the Buddha image behind it. Now that's called a perception. So you have you have the sense of receiving a visual experience. And very almost immediately, that's that perception. And that sense of when you get that engagement of a perception, then things start moving, feel something, and you want to do something or experience something, like you want, is it interesting, what's this person going to say? Or how do I feel about him? Or what does he think of me? Or some sort of activation occurs. You could think I'm looking healthy, which is nice, great. So some kind of activation occurs. This activation is called sankhara. And imagine, probably for most of you, this impression of being with me is you've chosen to do it, so it must be something you find agreeable. And you probably see me as a welcome, as a friend or as a guide. Whereas if a different appearance appeared on the screen, you might have other feelings about it. People reminds you of someone you fear or dislike or irritates you or threatens you. So different sankharas are actually, it's visual consciousness, it's the perception, feeling, sankharas, the activations and responses. Just kind of don't do anything about that. Try to change it. Just be aware of that. And the stirring of the citta, stirring of the heart, stirring of awareness. In that stirring, what's your sense of yourself? Probably not much, but there's some sense of you're witnessing, you're watching, you're wondering what to do, perhaps. And some more activation occurs. So some of these activations, sankhara, we might seem to be the image of Ajahn Sucitto, and some of these activations might be the sense of myself, who's watching this. And there's a certain shifting of how do I feel, what do I want to do, feel happy, something to happen. Yeah. There's those stirrings. Now, we can just be aware of that occurring within consciousness. Yeah, stirrings, perceptions and stirrings occurring within the experience consciousness. And it's not happening in the eye, is it? It's happening in the mind. But also what's possible is that sense of awareness of that happening. And once you get to the point of the awareness of that happening, something's able to contemplate, whether the experience is agreeable or disagreeable, stirred, agitated, or comforted, or happy. And then contemplating carefully what's the most suitable response to that stirring. Maybe something wants to make it more steady. Perhaps the wisest response is to cultivate or to bring up quality of calming, easing this stirred experience. And that might be supported by the experience of the body breathing, which is another set of activations. It might be supported by bringing forth a quality of goodwill. That is a kindliness around towards the stirred experience. We're not annoyed by it or expecting much out of it, but maybe may this sankharas move on, these forms change in an atmosphere of benevolence or non-resistance, at least. If you let your eyes gently close, and maybe it's quite quiet, you experience another consciousness, body consciousness, tactile impressions. Tactile impressions give you the sense of, I'm in this body. But that's a perception. Tactile impressions just manifest because that's the body's, that's bodily consciousness. Is there anybody in it? Well, who's that? Yeah. There's body consciousness, and there's a stirring around that. Just like when we're looking at the screen, we sense there's Ajahn Sucitto there and there's me here, but who's the me who's here? Is that, what's that? Could it just be there's perceptions and activations and same remedy, what same response, just steadying, calming. There's nobody in this, but these arise. Some may be pleasant, unpleasant, but they arise, whether we like them or not. As we cultivate that sense of disengaged, not trying to change anything or predict anything, or we're just responding, response to tactile impressions, visual impressions arising, and the response feels very appropriate. Steadying, not fascinated, not averse. If there's a aversion, then acknowledging the aversion or the frustration, and that's arising, responding to that. Seeing what response arises that's the most harmonious and appropriate. Probably not adding more activations, more stirring. Instead, something cooler, more than it has a sense of having no boundary to it. Not inside the body arises within this field of awareness, as do the perceptions and the form and the activations, sankharas, they arise within that. And then resetting one's sense of center, one's priority, for that awareness. We'll take a pause there. This is something you can, if you've got the idea of that, something you can perhaps bring to mind on other occasions. Do it with your eyes open, or even listening to a sound, seeing something. So it's a very universal contemplation as you open awareness to what's happening and recognizing that the sense of the self is a kind of an addition. That means a certain engagement with the activations. Sense of this is me getting stirred. Well, no, that's being stirred, the stirring, but you know, there's nobody there, as it were. And then that means one's the ability of the citta, the heart, to gently respond to that is nobody has no person doing that. It's just a very steady and pure response. So as I said earlier, today I'm going to respond to some questions that were sent in, and hopefully reviewing them to sense what will have the greatest benefit for the most people. And this is my sense of it. And so I'll start with a couple that are perhaps theoretical or model, theoretical overview. And the first one is the Eightfold Path, the Sankhara, something created by the mind. It is surely conditioned, but seems to limit the mind in good ways. How does the skillful creation of conditions, such as the path, fit into the teachings of karma? Is it skillful karma or the karma that leads to the end of karma? That phrase, the karma that leads to the end of karma, is attributed, is the Eightfold Path is the karma that leads to the end of karma. So definitely this is karma. Karma meaning there's some intentional activity. So one cultivates the Eightfold Path with an intentional eagerness and motivation. You have to really have some chanda, some desire, some motive, sense of purpose. Otherwise, it doesn't get properly cultivated. So this means intention, which is the source of karma. And if this can be cultivated, then there are two results. One is that one achieves a fruitful karmic result. Say one feels happier, clearer, one lives in a more suitable way, a sense of right direction, right livelihood, and so this is called results of good karma. And there's also the ending of a karma, which means that old habits, inherited karma, that is, old habitual patterns of mind, are eradicated through the meditative aspects or through the contemplative aspects, contemplative features of the training. One begins to refrain from and then investigate and uproot unskillful habits. And these old habits are called old karma. That is, they are sankharas that have become formulated, activations, ways of being, behaviors that have become formulated and embedded. And so they arose and they've been perpetuated. And the understanding is that if these continue to be perpetuated and not uprooted, then they persist. And one is the chitta is trapped, stuck in it. So we want to really eradicate or find a way out of that. And the Eightfold Path is, through the process of purifying, straightening resolve, straightening views, is providing the means to establish skillful conditions, also the means to investigate conditions. Because in order to establish skillful conditions, you have to investigate the conditions, the habits, the behaviors of your mind. Yeah. In order to say, well, this one is defective, or it doesn't work, or it's causing me pain. You need to investigate it. And even just calling it uncomfortable doesn't do it. You've actually got to get to grips with it. With an unskillful, addictive habit or negative impression of some kind. You've really got to get onto it. And so that activation towards dismantling unskillful habits is skillful karma leading to the end of it. So when that's finished, then that's gone. And instead of that habit, you've got some open, clear space. Naturally, this is the case. We're very much eager to accomplish, to bring around in our lives. Nobody likes uncomfortable, stuck patterns. But even in that process of investigating how these sankharas get established, we also recognize that even skillful ones have their drawback, in that the sankharas, as I've sort of just touched into, when they are attached to, when there's when an identity gets built out of them, when they act as a foundation for a sense of an identity, that's problematic, because we are still very much embedded in the karmic stream, and one begins to recognize this itself is potentially problematic, because we're still in a situation where we will experience the loss of others, unpleasant contact, unpleasant impressions, and burdens and so forth. So we think, can we even penetrate the very sense of being somebody in all this? And this is, of course, a very deep matter, not a small matter. It's not a matter we can just do intellectually. You have to really penetrate this formative process of how an identity comes into being, with an increasingly dispassionate attention and an increasingly precise and carefully trained attention. And so really, and this whole life is about really refining and learning that process, which is extremely subtle and resolute. Resolution is required. So, the sense is that with the Eightfold Path, it leads to what's called the Tenfold Path, which is the Tenfold Path is what begins to the chitta, the awareness, the mind, the heart, begins to actually penetrate the sense of self, being. And then we get what's called the right release. Release from this habit or this formation of identity, and then right knowledge of release. This is a tenfold path. It's possible, to have some, very difficult to define state of awareness or presence where this sense of I am is not holding it, it just holds itself. Right? So normally the I am is a particular formation that holds us, that holds the mind. I am this, I'm going to do that, I was this, I will be that. it sometimes holds us in a very negative way, like I'm not good at this, I should be like that, she's better than I am, this kind of stuff, or it's holding in a very uncomfortable way, or it can hold us in a more comfortable way, like I'm doing really well, things are going good for me, I want to make this happen, the world is a bit of a difficult condition, that's a beautiful thing. There's still a sense of being held in that, and then I'm going to meditate, which is of course how we need to start with that sense of self. I want to really practice purity, meditation, right view, and then actually begin to recognize that, well, once you begin to, these path factors begin to really crystallize and mature, and something's able to just sort of step back and let it go on, work by itself. And so that's that experience of samadhi and calm and steadiness and witnessing, where it just does it. It just works by itself, and that may be only for moments. That can be something that the mind, almost like it's like a beach that slopes. So you get these moments of that real letting go and realizing, oh, things still, you can still, still some presence that we might call awareness, knowingness, because with knowingness, you don't have to resist the unpleasant or hold on to the pleasant. It's able to allow them to pass through. But that definitely takes an enrichment and a fulfillment of so the awareness is made very rich and full, which is the whole sense of the Eightfold Path and the cultivation of the factors of awakening. Okay, so that's an overview. And of course, when we get down to the nitty-gritty of that, it gets sort of more intense and person specific. But fundamentally, we all begin to recognize there's something quite incomplete and unresolved and unfulfilled about the sense of being here, as an identity. Worry about the future or other people, and then you begin to what future? The world works in terms of futures, but that's a construction. What other people? Well, him and her. No. When you really directly witness the experience of other people, it's perception, as we described before, perception, feeling, activations. That's happening within awareness. You can see someone, talk to someone, but what's really occurring very directly and intimately is this process of consciousness, perception, feeling, and activations. And so then, okay, so now she's gone somewhere else, and that appearance doesn't happen. What mental impressions are being retained, and how does that need to keep happening? It can be an impression of myself. Does that have to keep happening? Do I have to? And then the pressures one makes upon oneself. One should be cheerful, bright, affectionate, helpful, loyal, support other people. Do we need to keep doing that? And that's sankhara. So this self-impression can generate a whole whirlpool of other impressions that get very tangling, which we'll begin to talk about. So another one is dependent arising, and I think without naming it, I've described aspects of dependent arising, how dependent upon consciousness, that these activations occur. But even prior to that, there's an activation that establishes consciousness, isn't there? So they work together. So in other words, there's something that says, oh, look at that. Or let's listen to that. That's an activation, sankhara. So if something chooses to select attention, then rather than feel what's happening in my feet, I'll look at the screen. Okay, so the activation places, and then consciousness arises depending on where that activation has occurred. So in dependent origination, you have this sense of activations establish consciousness, and as they establish consciousness, then the whole process of what's called citta, that is the affective sense, the feeling sense, and the sense of that which is motivated to do something, that gets placed in the realm of consciousness, right? So the feeling and the attentions and the activations then, because dependent upon seeing something. So the citta is then stirred by that consciousness being that placing into the realm of consciousness. And this may, well, of course, what else is there to do? Or we might say, well, actually, just for a moment, let's sort of put aside the screen, put aside today, put aside the ideas, and just focus on what's happening in the heart, feeling stirred, happy, confused, understanding this. Work on settling that. It's those traces of mental impressions, which if they're not fed by more thought, more input, begin to pass away, become into something that's not a matter of sense consciousness, but a matter of heart. This is not so difficult to touch into, but of course, to sustain it, we have to keep mediating how we're being affected by circumstances. And as this questioner considers, asks, I find it difficult to distinguish between the suffering due to ego and the suffering due to being in an environment with the wrong people or people I find myself afflicted by. So are these two aspects of the same thing? So we get the sense of what, with this process of consciousness and sankharas, what arises with that are the sense of them there and me here. And either of those, it's my fault because I'm not generous enough, I'm not kind enough, therefore I feel irritated by her. Or it's really her fault, she's really quite an annoying person. Naturally, anyone will feel annoyed by her. So the suffering is then placed either in the object, the person, or in the self, the subject. I'm just an inadequate person. So this is then, that's called grasping. And say, well, which is the wrong one? Is it me or is it her? Neither. It's the problem is grasping at these perceptions of self and other as if they are the problem. No, the problem really is the establishment of these perceptions and trying to, and then, that are dissonant. And so, well, actually, what can be done here? Do I say I shouldn't be this way, or do I say just to avoid her? Or maybe I think, well, I just sense that sense of irritation or frustration or unworthiness, and just let's feel that. And maybe a compassionate, steadying heart towards that experience of the relationship. So the key to dependent origination, and in fact, the path in general, is it's about relationship, not about me or you, but about the experience of contact. and what happens with contact, where, so out of contact comes a sense of relationship between two separate entities. But actually, they're not separate entities. They both arise in awareness from contact. Now, can we come back to the place of contact? Again, me and judging myself or judging her, just the contact, the relationship here is uncomfortable, stressful, pressurized. And so now that is something that one can directly sense and relate to. What's needed here? Perhaps a little more space, a little more openness, a little less reactivity about it all, less projecting it onto self or other, and perhaps some compassion or kindness, because relationships between people are often very up and down. That's called karma, karmic habits, because people have karmic habits that don't fit together very well. So it's like that. And then when one recognizes these are karmic habits, old patterns, that generate, that people are bound in, hearts are bound in, we maybe have a sense of something that, oh, I see. Then let's not generate any more negative karma. So I feel frustrated, irritated, confused. And so I just kind of feel my body and breathing and just letting that, being open to that and not adding more agitation around it. And perhaps that allows it, the non-feeding of that, the non-stirring of that, allows that ripple to dissipate. And then, we can come to a kind of quite a simple conclusion, which is so obvious, when it says, well, she's like that. So why does it get under my skin? Because of contact and the gripping of contact. The contact is one aspect of dependent origination. It's right there in the whole formulation of how consciousness works. So we know that bit. Contact. If there was no contact, there would be a feeling. Could that contact be steadied and related to from a place of dispassion and relinquishment of expectation, relinquishment of obligation, relinquishment of agitation, relinquishment of she's this and I'm that, and it's that. Yeah, this incarnation is problematic, it's challenging, but it means it does bring forth the best in us. We have to be wise. We have to be loving. We have to be patient, because nothing else is going to work. So this will actually gives the chitta has to be strengthened and recognizes that. And so when we look at dependent origination, if you go into the theory of it, you can generally find there's some tips in those various factors that are named: contact, feeling, craving, clinging. So that one, we can just give some attention to that. Particularly that very living flow of contact, feeling, and then the craving, and then the gripping, upadana. And the teaching is, if there's feeling, you don't have to have craving. You can feel something, but instead of wanting more of it or wanting less of it, you just know this is a feeling. So there's a little place where you can definitely get in there and open out of the reactivity. Keep your eye on that one. So something perhaps less erudite or esoteric. I've become interested in the appearance and shape of other people's bodies. In order to satisfy desire, I always want to watch movies or videos, especially erotic ones. It's hard for me to see the dissatisfaction it brings at the moment, only the gratification. Even so, I still feel something was not right afterwards. What should I do? Yeah, well, it's true that whenever there's, this any kind of strong arousal, feeling, and this passion, it's called raga, passion. When it arises, it's got a kind of a heat and a velocity, and one is intoxicated by it, and then so it sort of can feel quite pleasant, at a moment, in a kind of intoxicated way. But then you come out and you think, I don't feel very good. And then also you recognize, hey, I want to do it, even though I didn't feel very good, I want to do it again. Even though it left me in this feeling of rather embarrassed and ashamed, I still want to do it again. It's addictive. So if you witness the whole pattern, the Buddha says you see the sweetness. There's something luscious about passion. And then you see the hazard. Asada adinawa. And then with some, the idea is with some purposeful penetration, you also see nitsarana. You see the escape. You see where in all this is the escape. And so my recommendation is you focus on consciousness. So when we see a shape, body shape, then kind of human beings in general are, the conditioning process is to see shapes as this is an agreeable shape. We look at the shape of the Buddha, that lovely circle around the Buddha's head is much more beautiful than if it's some kind of raggedy mess. So I can see that, we see a shape. When we come to bodies, shapes of bodies have all sorts of perception. Right? That's really desirable. It's not irrational. It's not a rational thing, but we're programmed to do that because that's the idea. If there's an idea, the program of life is to breed, make more bodies. So naturally, the sexual attraction. But then that's a shape. That's a shape. That's a visual shape. You can't hold a visual shape. And it's a sign, a sanya, perception. So then you just focus on, just lift your attention from the shape or the perception, desirable, and focus on the heated quality, the stirred sankhara, heated, turbulent, intense. It's got a mesmerizing effect. Your mind is glued to those images. Wow, this is unpleasant. This is like being trapped. I'm kind of mesmerized by this. So this feeling, a sense comes up of dismay and perhaps even disgust, or certainly don't want this. And so what do I do? Well, there you realize you've got to strategize, because when addiction is there, you don't need an idea, you need strategy. Say, well, let's for a start, let's really switch that off, and every time you switch off, then you bring up the sense of good, well done, very good, beautiful. And how are you now? How are you now when you actually have a moment of restraining and you come back to yourself and you breathe out? How are you now? Feel good, feel clean, feel clear, good. Really get to know that when you're not mesmerized by passion. That's worth protecting, isn't it? And you have to go through this sense of shame. So you really value that, and then you keep that there, so you realize you need to restrain the senses. Oh dear. Yeah, we need to restrain the senses, pull them back. So you just switch off, turn away, close, restrain. It's pretty humbling, but well, we perhaps need to do that. Once you get the sense of this and the value of it, then perhaps as you've broken the compulsive of that addictive habit, you can begin to witness the process and see this is where the hook comes in. You know, the hook of passion comes in, and it comes in with a sense of you could get this, and you can't get it. You just get fire just burns through you, and you don't want it. Some of the chitta feels, I don't want that. And of course, very strong passions are both problematic, but also they force one to really do this work. So we look at flavors, we look at tastes, we look at these sense objects, and we realize, how long do you want to keep doing this? Getting stirred up around a flavor or a fragrance or a sight, and another one, and another one, and another one. How much do you really get tired of it all? You know, so the appetite wanes. You get this nibbida quality of feeling enough. Okay, so I'll move on. That's my advice, but definitely you've got to work on it. You've got to do the work. And if the sense of feeling not quite right should impel you to do the work, and you can do it. You'll feel much better if you do that work. Some other questions? I hope you don't mind. I might continue a little bit. Person feels like a failure. I feel like a failure when something in my life slips past my guard. I become annoyed. I've lost it. And I just feel like I'm a fake. I can't really manage Buddhism as I'd like to manage it. You know, I'm such a flunker. I've heard all his teachings. I keep losing it, getting irritated. I shouldn't be irritated. Well, yeah, it's humbling. But really, again, once again, the key point is the sense of the I am. Yeah. Is what is the thing you don't see. You see, mostly that's why these teachings have to be remembered. And the real problem is ignorance. You see, so we may feel I'm irritable. I shouldn't be irritable. Yeah, it's not good. But the real basic problem, the problem, is ignorance. Yeah. Because ignorance means you look in the wrong direction. You're looking at this thing called a self. And that's not going to get you very far. You're looking at something called a self to provide an answer. You're looking at a self to be perfect. You're looking at a self to be some model of something good, like a good Buddhist self. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? What are you looking for? So ignorance sends you in the wrong direction. And also it sends you in the wrong mode, like you crave, you want to be something. Well, where does that go? Failure, frustration. So then we begin to see, look, you know, these ideas of what you should be, these expectations that hover in the back of the mind, you've got to actually cool that down and recognize his annoyance, his irritation, here's the flustering. Let's get on, let's deal with that. And your identity is not going to help you deal with that, because your identity is that which is holding it. So it's this sense of real, honest opening to the fact of passion, irritation, lust, jealousy, craving, whatever. This is certainly not, you know, glamorous, but there it is. And then, but these are not self, these is old karma. These are patterns and behaviors. So can we really see that as it is? So seeing it as it is called non-ignorance. Now, that doesn't seem like that's the answer, but it's the beginning, because when there's non-ignorance, then perhaps the response can be, well, instead of trying to be somebody who doesn't have this, or somebody who's got all the answers, instead one starts with skillful means are required. Yeah. And maybe loving kindness is required. Maybe dispassion is required. So then the formations that are being generated are not coming from ignorance, they're coming from some clarity. And so this is furthering. It's not the complete abolition of ignorance, but at least it's going in the right direction. And then as the force of ignorance and the potency of these path factors working together means that the responses to this experience are becoming more fruitful and helpful. And what happens is gradually those behaviors begin to fade out. You know? And it's like then of course there isn't the need to handle it. So some of these things get quieter, more peaceful. Then that sense of clarity, as I've touched on before, begins to penetrate even the sense of the person who's trying to be a good person. That's not a bad idea, but it's a very limited perspective. And so actually there's no person here to be a good or bad person. It's just awareness, consciousness, sankharas, perceptions, and then that cools the whole atmosphere of the citta becomes cool and dispassionate and peaceful. You know? So, you know, a successful Buddhist doesn't even know they're a Buddhist. They don't know what success is. It's just like, why bother to cause suffering? Is more the issue. Okay, there are more, but I think perhaps you're getting a picture that is evolving out of this virtual dialogue, and you know, touching to perhaps the same themes are coming up time and again. Another one here about a mental pattern. Mental pattern is a sankhara. I obsess over irrelevant details, word etymologies, trivia. Okay, you're one of those Wikipedia freaks, I imagine, or looking at dictionaries. I do the same thing. But I don't obsess about it. I'm working with it. Then, particularly when I feel panic, so this sense of obsessiveness helps to give me some stability when I'm panicking. So I start to refrain from these activities, but then I feel quite scary. So it's uncertain. So this pattern of engagement with trivia does help to quell for a moment that sense of panic and uncertainty. Yeah. However, this is beautiful. I feel the panic is related simply to the exposure and chaos of the universe of change. Absolutely. However, in moments I can simply be with my feelings. There is a deeper sense of ease and comfort, and I don't need to run anywhere. Do you have any advice in relation to all of this? I would say persist. Persist, you're doing the right thing. Very simply speaking. You know, that's also a part of the whole tightness of this net of bondage and being trapped, is that when you begin to acknowledge some of these obviously just irrational, dysfunctional or confusing actions that are coming up, like obsessive behaviors. Person had obsessive behavior about erotic, have obsessive behavior about getting into little details that fascinate the mind. These are all getting fascinated by something to play with. But at least it kind of holds you together. And then, you know, not very nicely perhaps, but to then be able to relinquish, to sort of pause on that, it does mean there's a sense of, where am I? You know, hey, what's going on? Because we got so used to that pattern, you know, that when it stops, there's a sense of uncertainty and unsteadiness. So you have to be with that, you know, and ideally, you know, the path factors that are helping you to review that behavior, the sense of attention and careful attention, mindfulness and calm and dispassion, again, non-identification, it's just a pattern. Those factors are not just ideas, they have a potent energy to them. They have an energy that's steadying and nourishing. You know, one of my favorite themes, as you probably recognize, is Sankharas are energetic, and there's a skillful energy that comes with the Eightfold Path, which is, you know, clear, steady, resolute, gentle, non-harsh. You can feel it in your body. You know. So the deepening and the enriching of that, you look in the enlightenment factors, you see this Dhamma Vijaya, mindfulness, investigation, energy. Then what comes in is rapture. One feels lifted up. Ease, one feels comfortable. Those are energetic experiences. Something starts to feel a little bit brighter. Now that helps, because then you're supported by something that's not your identity. So then when you have that support of something that's not your identity, it's just the fruitful, felt experience of the happiness of the path. It means one's able to let go, because it's like, you know, you're in the water can hold you. And then you begin to be able to release. And then, oh, it's just a feeling, all that stuff about my obsessiveness, and just be with that. You're able to be with that. This is called upekkha, right? Equanimity. And then it subsides. So this is, you know, we can really apply that to all the complexities of our sankhara behaviors, that same pattern. Essentially, to why this term sankhara, though it's not easy to translate, formations, activations, conditioned tendencies, conditioned forces, is so crucial, because that's where the feeling starts to move. And as it moves, it creates a self. And out of that self, all these complications about what I am, what I should be, what I never will be, what she thinks of me, start to form. It's like, it's a breeding ground. The sense of self is a breeding ground for complexity and tangle. You know? And it's actually, and then you begin to really ask yourself who that is. And it's not a permanent entity. It's just this knot of activations. The more we can get into that knot of activations, dispassion, again, you know, calm, steady, then the activations are being fed by something that begins to help to melt. And then the complexities of the personal world sort of evaporate. You know, they begin to evaporate. This doesn't happen in a moment. It generally takes persistence. Some things kind of evaporate quite quickly. Some things it definitely takes time to let that sort of subside. You know, it's not a finger click. Well, then it's really useful to think about these things, to discuss these things. The other people talk about those things. This is the human condition. You might very well, you know, you have your own take on it, but it's the same stuff for all of us. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be confused. use the teachings that penetrate the sense of self, dependent origination, and look into the source of suffering. To do that, you're abolishing ignorance. When you abolish ignorance to that degree, you get a clearer way of behaving. That clearer way of behaving will further reduce ignorance and craving. And so this process builds up. And, you know, what else is there to do in life anyway? Well, we've got this opportunity. We've been blessed with the possibility of inheriting this powerful teaching from the Buddha, being transmitted. We have the faculty to be able to understand at least some of it. And this is the most important thing in your life. It's going to lead to good fortune and happiness. Okay. So I'll stop there for today and hope some of that's been useful.
Andamayam Dhammakataya Sadhu Kadam Dadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodhami.
So once again, let's conclude paying our respects to the Buddha. If there's anyone in the world you can respect, anyone you can feel grateful for, surely this is the opportunity to have that experience. Enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the temple. Blessed one, disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the temple.
So let us all now offer our thanks for this timely reminders by Ajahn Sucitto by offering him 3 bows. 3 bows to the teachers, please.
Okay, so take care, everyone. Stay in the stream of Dhamma. I hope to be able to connect with you again in due course, as long as this body continues to exist on this planet. At least another 2, I think I've got at least another 2 weeks left. Hopefully a month. See you later. Take care.
Take care, Lampo.